You heard it. It's time. No unusual animals today, just Juniper. She's been herding cats all morning, so she just needed a break and she wanted to say hi. Anyway, you go find a cat. Go find the cats to herd. Anyway, today we are going to finish up the unit on the 19th century, which means we will have the test next week. I do have prepared, and it's already published and on the website, that extra credit quiz, 5 points for just giving it a try. No points if you get it wrong. This one is based on today's class. So you really should listen to some of the class or watch the video before you do the extra credit quiz, because that's kind of the point of doing this. So anyway, today we finish up the 19th century, followed by, we have the review next Tuesday and the test next Wednesday through Friday online. So next Thursday, you can use the class time to take the test, because I know a lot of you work. And this chapter is a little bit more nuts and bolts and names and dates than theory. So y'all should do a little better on this one. And I'm going to try to make it articulate with the stuff we do in class and have it really straight that way. Anyway, on the essays, should get through them by the end of the week, which is tomorrow, and they've been pretty good. The issue is a lot of you, the biggest single thing is a lot of you have more than one topic. You'll talk about the cell phone and cyberbullying and addiction and body image. Each of those three topics is an essay unto itself. So that's the one thing that people have been missing. A lot of people have, since I explained what I'm really looking for and what you need to do to get the 100 rather than just the 95, a lot of people did work worthy of the 100, and good for you. Anyway, so that's what's coming. In today's episode, we have the telephone and the photograph as far as the new technology, and the content, that whole concept of the big media and yellow journalism. So those are the things we'll talk about. And, the whole 19th century really was about things moving quicker, faster, new technologies. The 18th century, the 1700s, was about ideas, free speech and free press, and speaking truth to power. But technology did not change since Gutenberg's time. You had the same technology for 300 years, but boom, the technology starts changing in the 1800s, and it really starts speeding up again and again through today. So that's what we talk about, the different technologies. Okay, telephone. What difference does the telephone make? Direct communication. That means you're talking directly to somebody. In the telegraph, you're sending it to the telegraph office, and then somebody delivers a message. This, you pick up the phone and there's your mom, there is family members, there is whatever. So what difference does that make in communication? Anybody? You can do it in chat if you want. Direct communication means you're actually one-to-one. You get that emotion. You get that, hi, I'm really here. So that is, you know, it adds immediacy. It makes you care more. In the media, that means you're not limited by dots and dashes. You can sit down and you can take notes. You can remember things, more information, more interviews, more quotes, and different people. You can call all sorts of folks. You can get information from, again, different folks. And a lot of those people are from different backgrounds. Anyway. And then, of course, we have new jobs. You know, people making phones, and new jobs like the telephone operator, which is largely female. Women coming in off of, you know, farming economy and into the offices. More women in offices, in businesses. Again, a lot of social changes. Funny thing on the phone and where it came from. The phone didn't just come from one place. Everybody knows Alexander Graham Bell, and there's a good reason for that. Bell was not only a very smart inventor, he was also a very smart business person. He got the patent. And when you have a patent for something, that means nobody can copy your work without your permission. So it's the business end that starts to become more and more prominent.
Let's go help people customize and save with Liberty Mutual. Okay, who sat at my desk?
Who came
This
up with
Friday.
Remo
The outsider's cruelty to my people is all I've known.
Deal should be experienced on the biggest screen possible.
Das Food frisst keinen Gurkensalat, translated as the horse does not eat cucumber salad. These are the most famous words in connection with a unique invention that has become indispensable in our daily lives. What was first dismissed as a pointless toy, its potential was quickly recognized by some clever minds. This invention is responsible for the largest patent dispute in history. We are talking about the telephone. Hello, my dear friends of Encrypted Communication. I'm Brett, and a very big welcome to another episode of It's History. Now, every country has its telephone inventor. The French have Charles Bousseau, who in 1854 described a telephone but never built the thing. The Italians have their theater technician and candlestick maker, Antonio Meucci, who in 1871 drew up a blueprint for a phone, but it never became anything more. And then there's the good old American Elisha Gray, who turned in his patent just a little bit too late. Nonetheless, the invention of the telephone has become closely associated with two other names. Alexander Graham Bell, the one who everyone knows, and Johann Philipp Reis, the name who maybe only a few of you know. Two super intelligent people whose biographies could not be any more different. One was a son.
This is a really interesting little contrast. You had Reis, who was working nearly 20 years before Bell. And again, he's not the famous one. You have Bell working 20 years later, and he gets all the credit, largely because he's a better business person, but we'll see.
Son of a professor of rhetoric, and at the age of 10 entered a private school in Edinburgh, Scotland. Later, he would come to study Latin and Greek. By the age of 17, Alexander Graham Bell became a teacher of elocution and music in Elgin, also in Scotland. The other was the son of a baker and became an orphan by the age of 10. By the virtue of his circumstances, he could not find himself anything more than a commercial apprenticeship. However, Johann Philipp Reis can be counted as one of the most important pioneers of the telephone. A feat all the more impressive considering he acquired all of his knowledge through self-study. Reis was one of the first persons to send a word by an electrical wire. His most productive period as an inventor began about 1858 in a boys' boarding school in Friedrichsdorf. Surprisingly, the inventor received a job as a teacher of French, physics, mathematics, and chemistry. With whatever little time he had left to spare, he spent inside a barn he had converted into a lab. While he had brilliant ideas, they did not achieve what he had hoped for. Inventions such as the velocipede, an early form of the bicycle, or roller skates, the forerunner of today's inline skates, did not find large audiences. Asphalt and concrete were just not that popular back then. The idea of his most important invention, the telephone, was inspired from a physics lesson where he had built a model of the human ear. He carved the external parts of the ear out of wood, and the eardrum he made out of a piece of pig intestine. Having already experimented in his laboratory with electricity and was familiar with Samuel Morse's telegraph, he came to the idea that he could reproduce sound of all kinds by the galvanic current at any distance. From those of you who are not familiar, the sound produced through galvanic current is the result of a natural resonance that is reproduced when an iron rod is placed inside the hollow of an insulated wire with the current being continuously interrupted. His voice transmission was based on the conversation of sound waves into electrical signals with the help of membranes whose vibrations interrupt the circuit. These pulses became then transmitted through a line and then translated back into sound waves through an amplified wooden sound box into a sort of noise that could be identified as speech signals. He presented his invention before the Forum of the Physical Society in Frankfurt am Main on the 26th of October, 1861, under what was the unwieldy title, "On the Reproduction of Musical Sounds to Any Distance Through the Medium of Galvanic Current." He called his device the telephone. During his demonstration, the words that he spoke into the device at one end were clearly reproduced at the other. "The horse does not eat cucumber salad." Rice chose this strange phrase because, well, it makes no sense, so therefore no one could guess what the next word would be. News of the invention spread quickly, and Rice gave demonstrations of his new device to both the Emperor of Austria and the King Max of Bavaria. Rice's phones were shipped for scientific purposes on long trips up to Tbilisi in the Caucasus. But as like his other inventions, his telephone came out just too darn early, and the importance was overlooked. It was simply seen as a plaything for physics. While living long enough to become intensely embittered and resentful, on January 14th, 1874, Philip Rice died of pulmonary tuberculosis in Friedrichsdorf at the age of 40. Alexander Graham Bell had
Okay. He had the machine. He showed it around. People said, "Oh, that's cute." His timing was off. We talked about an invention last week where the timing was a little off. Remember? The digital camera. Remember in photo history that people came to the person who invented the digital camera, who died just this year, went to Kodak and said, "Hey, I have digital photography." Kodak says, "Yeah, but we have film. Who's gonna wanna see a picture on a computer?" Whoops. So inventor goes away, and we have to wait another 20 years from 1975 to the 1990s for the internet to take off to really get into digital photography. So again, it shows us that you have to have your timing right as well as an invention. You know, that goes, I know people I know want to make a YouTube channel. They want to be the next Kardashians. The Kardashians have been around for 20 years. You know, I think you need to come up with something else. Anyway, timing as well as business.
had much more luck than Rice. On the 14th of February, 1876, he registered his phone at the US Patent Office. He and his two brothers, while students in Edinburgh, Scotland, had already been experimenting with Rice's apparatus since 1862. They had found several improvements. Apart from the miserable sound quality of Rice's phone that would squeak more than speak, the device would only transmit in one direction. Because two brothers to tuberculosis, Alexander Graham Bell made further developments to the phone. In 1870, the family moved to Canada. And in addition to his job as a teacher of the deaf, he devoted himself to further development of the phone. Well, since Bell had only his holidays and Sunday evenings to work on his project, he pulled in the engineer Thomas A. Watson to help him out. Bell did not conceal the fact that he had studied the works of Philip Rice. But Rice was not the only source from which he drew his information. The Italian-American Antonio Meucci had filed a patent for a telephone 5 years before, in 1871. But the request was denied because poor Meucci couldn't pay for the processing fee. Bell apparently worked in the former workshops of Meucci. And with Meucci's records and Meucci's own equipment, Bell developed his own phone. During this time, Meucci demanded that he have his plans back, but Bell said that they were lost. Meucci took Bell to court, but as is the case time and time again throughout history, the one without enough money could not stand up to the injustices caused by those who did. Meucci died an impoverished man, and it was only after his death that the US authorities issued a fraud case against Bell. But it gets even more interesting and juicy. Only 2 hours after Bell submitted his patent, in came the American physicist Elisha Gray, his closest rival for the rights over the invention. Gray had teamed up with the Western Union Telegraph Company, then the largest cable company in the US. His patent was of a better design than that of Bell's, and over the next few years, about 600 trials were held against Bell's patent, which finally went up before the Supreme Court. But thanks to his stepfather, who represented him as a patent attorney, Bell was allowed to continue to profit from his work. Bell's patent of 1876 will become one of the most profitable property rights of all time. In 1877, he founded the Bell Telephone Company.
There you go. Not only did Bell work on the telephone, and again, he put it together from a lot of different sources, and he, and so he put it together from different sources, but he got the patent and the telephone company. So you had to go to Bell in order to use your phone.
That spawned one of the largest telephone communication companies of our day, AT&T. By the end of the 19th century, there were over 230,000 telephone lines connected by over 500,000 miles of wire throughout the United States. When Alexander Graham Bell died on August 1st, 1922, all phone communication in North America was cut off for a minute to honor the man. In 1877, Bell's device made it all the way to Germany. And on the 19th of November, the German postmaster ordered the construction of telegraph wires that would include telephone capabilities. According to a survey by the International Telecommunication Union, the end of 2006 counted nearly 4 billion telephone connections worldwide. Of these, around 2.7 billion were mobile connections. Today, Bell is considered, particularly by those in the US, to be the inventor of the telephone. But the basic fact is that the ideas for his telephone were taken from the works of Antonio Meucci and Johann Philipp Rice. After 140 years, telecommunications has...
So the whole point is a lot of people are working on different parts of it. The person who gets the credit is the person who puts it together and the person who markets it and makes the money. So those are the things to understand. Anyway, we go from there to we go from there, and of course we know what happened next. The phone, Bell company became AT&T, and it's still there. Anyway, so after that, we'll talk, the next big invention is the phonograph, new media industry. We had visual communication in photography. Now we have sound. What difference does sound make? Remember, multiple inventors worked on the telephone. The phonograph, new media industry, now we have sound. What difference does that make? Diversity. Different cultures. Different people. You're here, what do you have, before, with the phone, you're talking to your family, maybe business. Entertainment, you're listening to, at first, opera was the big thing, which are Italian and German, different cultures coming in. You start hearing popular music, from minstrel shows, from live theater, and a lot of that comes from the African American community. Yes. That's correct. You can hear what people are saying and how they're saying it. Different dialects. Excellent. Because you notice as this happens, you start losing local accents because everybody on TV has the same accent. You don't have Southern accents or as many where I come. Well, I come from New England, where people in Maine, they talk like this. And my cousins, they talk more like this, somewhere between the Kennedys and Brooklyn. So yeah, but you lose more of that because you hear how people talk.
Hey, I'm walking here.
Mm.
Hey, I'm walking here.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, so things are different. They're very good. Go back to the links. We learn a little about Edison. Yes, we know.
Thomas Edison was born in Millen, Ohio on February 11, 1847. He didn't learn to talk until he was almost 4 years old. In school, he often daydreamed and was labeled as mentally slow by his teacher. Because of these comments, young Edison's mother took him out of school and homeschooled him. In 1854, his family moved to Port Huron, Michigan.
Yes, I'll put that in there. Estelle, you're absolutely right. They have ambiguous middle American kind of flat accents. You ever notice how airplane pilots, they all kind of talk, well, we're just going through just a little bit of turbulence. Well, that's because Chuck Yeager, the famous pilot and early astronaut, came from Oklahoma. So yeah, there's all of these accents. Very good.
Edison sold candy and newspapers on trains. He became a telegraph operator after saving the daughter of a station agent from an oncoming train. He moved to Louisville, Kentucky in 1866 and became an employee of Western Union. Starting in 1872, Edison worked
on the telegraph. Starts to get into that electronic.
The quadruplex telegraph system. It allowed telegraphs to send and receive 4 signals at the same time on the same wire. Edison's system wasn't a new invention, but an improvement on the duplex system created by Moses G. Farmer and Joseph Stearns. Edison's first invention was a phonograph in 1877. Many people today incorrectly associate the phonograph with a record player. Edison's device recorded sound on the cylinders and was geared as a recorder for the voice, not for recording and playing back music. It was the gramophone that recorded to discs and became the record player that we know today. Edison did not invent the first
Yeah, so it was Emil Berliner, who we'll talk about in a minute, who gave us the phonograph we use today. The idea Edison took from various sources. Berliner gave us the system we have today.
Electric light bulbs. He invented the first commercially practical incandescent light. Edison bought the patent on what was probably the first invented light bulb. Later, he came across Joseph Wilson Swan, who had developed a...
And what did the electric light have to do with the telegraph? Remember from last week? Because we're working across different time zones, people are starting to work nights. Before this, you went to bed at nightfall. Now you're staying up night, you need the electric light. See, all of these technologies work together to give us symbiosis.
Patented a working light bulb. Edison made Swan a partner and eventually bought him and his patent out, giving him full ownership of the patent. Edison patented a system for electrical distribution in 1880 in order to capitalize on his electric lamps. Edison used direct current to power his system, which had its limitations. And when these limitations were made public, Edison launched a propaganda campaign to convince people of the superiority of direct current. This war of the currents, as it was.
There was a movie about this last year that Edison and Nikola Tesla had different electrical systems.
Called brought in the involvement of Nikola Tesla, an inventor and rival of Edison, who had created the alternating current power generator. Alternating current eventually proved to be a better system of transmitting power. In 1888, Edison started working on inventing a motion picture camera. Edison passed on the work of creating the camera to one of his assistants. Edison himself had very little involvement in the invention. On May 20th, 1891, the kinetoscope and the kinetograph were revealed. Moving images were taken with the kinetograph and shown.
Yes, and he had the patent on the movie projector. And when we get to movies, patents and business will make a difference. But we'll leave Edison for the moment. The other side of it is Berliner.
Remove your hand from the box, and you die.
What's in the box?
Pain.
The music industry as we know it today is a mere 100 years old. It's a
Okay, he goes through Edison again. But I really want to talk about the next thing. At about 3.
technique of sound recording. Developed by Emil Berliner, a
There we
German
go.
from
The
Hanover who
next step.
immigrated to America. His device quickly became very popular and virtually set up the foundation for the record. On the 26th of December, 1887, Berliner patented his device that would record sound into discs. He called it a gramophone. Edison noticed a renewed interest along with improvements that were made in the sound recording technology, and up to 1890 attempted to upgrade his phonograph, but it still could not compete with the record. The key component to Berliner's innovation was that unlike Edison, who recorded sound on a cylinder, Berliner recorded sound vibrations on a disc. On May 16th, 1888, about 6 months after Edison's
Now we still call the Recorded Music Awards the Grammys.
invention, Berliner presented his device to the public for the first time to an expert panel on the Franklin Institute of Philadelphia. Berliner also used the horn, membrane, and needle method to record. However, he also invented another kind of sound recording technique. He didn't carve the sound waves vertically onto a cylinder like Edison, but instead recorded the sound from left to right using horizontal modulation of the needle as it traced its line along the rotating disc with a thin coating of soot. Berliner's method improved sound quality considerably. Directly after the recording process, the soot was varnished and then used to photo engrave its equivalent grooves onto a metal disc. The discs had an average diameter of 25 to 30 centimeters and could be played at a speed of 78 RPMs. However, a major drawback emerged from Berliner's method. The disc could only be used to play sounds once they were recorded and could not be used to record from again, since the grooves of the disc projected inward. Thus, the records could only be made one at a time, which the artist found to be unacceptable as they were forced to play the same song over and over again. Berliner continued to experiment and came up with a solution in 1895. He replaced the black layer of carbon with a massive sheet of wax, which he then electroplated, resulted in a negative record with grooves projecting outward and not inward that he could use to stamp positive copies with. Electroplating is a physical process which goes all the way back to the Italian physicist Luigi Galvani that uses electric current to change the surface properties of an object. With this process, copper plates could finally be reproduced at will. For these copper plates, Berliner used a material composed of around 70% stone dust and 30% shellac, resulting in the so-called shellac discs. On the subject of shellac, for those like me who never heard of it before, it's a resin secreted from the female lac insect. Now, this parasite has its home in Burma, India, and Thailand and loves to feed on the sap of lacquer trees. Now, these sophisticated bugs protect their eggs by covering the branches.
And we later went to plastic or vinyl. But you see how the system worked, that it was Edison who came up with the idea, well, from various sources, but it's Berliner who gave us the modern industry. Go back to that. Anyway, so we have, again, new diversity and culture, sound, emotion. Very good. After that, while this is happening, new media stuff is going on. Media content is developing. After the Civil War, a lot of readership, a lot of new people reading, big, cities, different people, women, people of color, all getting involved in politics and society because they're able to read. More readers mean more business for the newspapers. And in this era, the newspaper was the mass media. That's all you had that was huge and massive. And you had a couple of people who really made made a lot of money. And again, the media is always a business, and money doesn't always follow ethics. Again, we talk a lot about ethics and bias. At this time, everybody assumes media content was biased. This idea of truth and ethics and balance and fairness, that didn't come for another 20 years, didn't come to the 20th century. At this time, you have big media, big messy media without any ethics. And as people realize big media might be messy and powerful, maybe we should do something about it. That's the 20th century, but it gets a little crazy. Give me the story and I will give you the war. And they got one, as Quentin was saying earlier before class started.
It has been written that the pen is mightier than the sword. Perhaps it's because the pen has the ability to summon the sword. Colonial newspapers filled with opinion pieces written by the likes of Benjamin
Yep, the pen summons the sword, and we will see that.
Franklin and Thomas Paine helped mobilize Americans for the Revolutionary War. The American media would rapidly
They call it yellow journalism. He's the yellow kid. He is a silly character, a funny character. It's like, in my day, it's like saying Alfred E. Newman journalism or whatever silly, I guess you call it Squid Game journalism today. Ethics don't matter and it's all silly.
evolved from these small localized chains to become a multi-million-dollar business equivalent to millions of pens. Through the newspapers the printing press turned out, the world got its first taste of mass media. For William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, mass media meant mass profit. The circulation war between these two men demonstrated that the media leads the nation for better or for worse. Pulitzer and Hearst would leave a legacy in blood and ink and show how war can be brought from print to presence. Joseph Pulitzer was born in Mako, Hungary on April 10, 1847. After gaining American citizenship in the Civil War, Pulitzer moved to Missouri, where he would take over the Vestal Post and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Pulitzer took the profits from these papers and, with the help of his brother Albert Pulitzer, purchased the New York World from railroad baron Jay Gould in 1883. The World quickly rose to prominence by securing the election of Grover Cleveland in 18.
Yes, he was a Cleveland person and Hearst was a Blaine person. We'll get to that in a minute.
1884. New York was a swing state that would decide the election, and as Pulitzer biographer James Morris would write, electing Cleveland and boosting circulation were completely intertwined.
Yep, partisan newspaper. Let's get our person in. Know any modern media who's kind of partisan? Fox News. And one could argue MSNBC and kind of sort of CNN sometimes. They all got their things. Some things don't change.
The latter increasing the former. Pulitzer put his aggressive style of journalism on display through the political assassination of Republican candidate James Blaine. He explained his philosophy by writing, "The most valuable and successful paper will generally be that which has the most enemies." Pulitzer would use his vicious muckraking to make the World the most widely circulated newspaper in America. William Randolph Hearst was born on April 29, 1863, to U.S. Senator George Hearst. Pulitzer's success at the New York World inspired Hearst to drop out of college and take over the San Francisco Examiner from his father, giving it the title the Monarch of Dailies. Hearst quickly moved to acquire the greatest talents of his time, including Ambrose Bierce, Mark Twain, Jack London, and political cartoonist Homer Davenport. In 1895, Albert Pulitzer refused to sell the New York Morning Journal to his brother, instead opting to sell his paper to Hearst, who renamed it simply the New York Journal. The circulation war between Hearst and Pulitzer was ultimately a contest between competing philosophies.
Hearst believed in journalism of action. So he thought that the newspaper itself should bring about social change and social action in very concrete ways. Pulitzer.
They wanted things to happen. They wanted to, well, Hearst did. Pulitzer was a little smaller, but Hearst wanted to use the media to wield power. We've heard that before too.
Sort of believed that too, but not the sort of inserting the newspaper into stories. Pulitzer's paper is doing some hardcore investigative work. So, his paper not only investigates that, but they make it into a crusade. They beat that story each and every day like a drum until there's change.
With that, the stage was set for the bitter birth of yellow journalism. When the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor on February 15, 1888, both papers immediately jumped to treachery. For a week following the sinking, the journal dedicated an average of 8.5 pages to the sinking of the USS Maine. Hearst even went so far as to announce a $50,000 reward for information leading to the apprehension of the perpetrators of the bombing. While the world was not as outlandish as the journal, it too pointed the finger at Spain and had numerous articles alleging treachery on the part of the Spanish.
Yeah, those terrible Spanish blew up our battleship. You know what really happened? Some of our sailors were rolling their own next to the powder magazine. Boom. So, it wasn't the Spanish, but, they're them Spanish folks. And at the same time, if they're funny language, the same time, the British were in Africa and Asia, as were the French, and the Germans are starting to colonize in Africa as well. We wanted to get into the act. Nice excuse to start an empire.
All of this led the American people to call to war with the motto of "Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain." 2 months later, President William McKinley convinced Congress to declare war. The wartime reporting proved to be just as sensational as the antebellum, creating one of the most famous myths in American history, the myth of the Rough Riders. Articles on the Battle of San Juan Hill depicted Roosevelt and his riders as heroes who helped take San Juan Hill.
Yep. War needs a hero. We'll talk a little bit more about Teddy Roosevelt. He knew how to use the media.
Leading to many misconceptions. The Rough Riders were nicknamed Wood's Weary Walkers because of their status as more of an infantry troop than a cavalry outfit. Roosevelt and the Rough Riders actually fought on Kettle Hill and suffered heavy casualties. In fact, it was the 24th and 25th Colored Infantry units who were...
Yes, look who did the battle for him. It wasn't all the Rough Riders. It was these guys. And the Rough Riders didn't ride much. They walked.
Responsible for the victory because their covering fire prevented the Rough Riders from being totally annihilated. Regardless of these facts, Roosevelt's Rough Riders were hailed as heroes, and the groundwork for Roosevelt's political career had been laid. While it is true that both papers exaggerated America's military dominance, the war truly was a crushing defeat to Spain. America's Navy, thanks to advanced technology, crushed the Spanish Armada in Cuba. At the Battle of Manila Bay, Commodore George Dewey's Asiatic Squadron completely annihilated the Spanish Pacific Squadron, ending the fight for the Philippines. Hearst's journalism in action ultimately bested Pulitzer's investigative method in wartime coverage. Hearst would break Cuban freedom fighter Evangelina Cisneros out of a Spanish prison camp, and even go so far as to make plans to personally fund a blockade of the Suez Canal. The Journal boldly asked, "How do you like the Journal's war?" And indeed, the Journal had overtaken the world as America's most read newspaper. Unfortunately, a much bloodier war would soon dominate the headlines. On February 4th, 1899, fighting broke out in what would be known as the Second Battle of Manila. 15,000 Filipinos sought to take Manila from an American occupying force of 19,000. The outmanned, outgunned Filipinos lost the battle with heavy casualties. On June 7th, the First Philippine Republic declared war on the United States. It is at this point that most high school history textbooks quit talking about Hearst, Pulitzer, and yellow journalism. But this is a serious mistake. The Philippine-American War would not have occurred without the Spanish-American War the world the Journal brought from print to presence.
Yeah, look at how we portrayed the Philippines.
Yellow journalism did not stop. The World published an article on January 27, 1889, claiming that Private Lapierre, an American soldier, had been infected with leprosy by the Filipino forces. Historians believe this account is false and that Lapierre...
Yep, look at, again, demonizing your enemies. Look at good old Americans. Look at, we're beating these guys.
The leper was a pun for a sensational headline. Torture was commonly employed by American soldiers. A Senate committee reported that in one instance, a method of torture known as the water cure,
which we still use,
killed 134 out of 160 natives it was administered to. Both papers depicted the Filipinos as savage, even animal-like in their racist artistic renderings while ignoring American atrocities. Thanks to the newspaper's blessings, Roosevelt became popular enough to become vice president. After William McKinley's death, Roosevelt used brute force to end the war, killing 220,000 Filipinos in the process. As the world and the journal praised Roosevelt, they were ultimately praising his militarism. Pulitzer and Hearst both made a killing off the killing overseas.
See, yep, after the Spanish-American War, we took over Cuba, Puerto Rico, Canary Islands, the Philippines, Hawaii we already had.
Setting a dangerous precedent for generations to come. Instead of peace being the default setting of American foreign policy, intervention became the norm. Citizen Kane,
Yep, we started intervening in the rest of the world.
film inspired by Hearst, explains this trend best.
You provide the prose poems, I'll provide the war.
And that's what happened.
In the case of World War II, Roosevelt's militarism may have inadvertently caused the war. The thesis that Roosevelt inspired Japanese imperialism is most famously argued by James Bradley in The Imperial Cruise, and asserts that Roosevelt sanctioned Japan's acquisition of Korea and advised the Japanese as Aryans of the East to seek empire. Roosevelt urged Japan to establish Monroe Doctrine-like policies.
So, again, Roosevelt loves war, sees the Japanese. They had the Russo-Japanese War. The Japanese defeated the Russians and took over Korea. Roosevelt negotiated the peace treaty and won the Nobel Peace Prize, and he's bringing in the Japanese, and the Japanese invade Korea, Manchuria, and a few years later, Hawaii. Anyway, I've kind of glossed over one other thing. Remember, the battleship Maine happened. We attacked them based on nothing. A lot of you, about 18, 19 years old, so about the time you were born, 2003, we had another war. Anything, and the Secretary of State at the time, Colin Powell, recently passed. What does that have to do with the battleship Maine? The war in Iraq in 2003. I tell you, weapons of mass destruction. We claimed that Saddam Hussein in Iraq had nukes and germ warfare and chemical warfare. Didn't have it. It was made up. And the media reported it because they were afraid to look unpatriotic otherwise. And we went to war. Now, Saddam Hussein's a bad guy. Maybe it's good that we got rid of him, but there were no weapons of mass destruction. So be very careful. Check your sources because, again, history repeats itself. Anyway, give me the story, I will give you the war. More fun and games from the era.
By 1897, Joseph Pulitzer's New York World and William Randolph Hearst's New York Journal have solved the Jigsaw murder mystery. And they've done so by breaking traditional rules and bending ethics.
So they had a lot of influence. They had a lot of power.
Now Hearst turns his attention back to Cuba and finds the perfect story in Evangelina Cisneros. She is educated, refined, and unmistakably beautiful.
Hearst's newspaper said that she's guilty of only having the best blood in Cuba in her veins. Otherwise, she's an innocent victim of the Cuban rebellion.
And Hearst makes the most of her story.
It's a damsel in distress story made for newspapers.
Hearst smartly uses the storyline as a symbol for Cuban oppression under.
Yes. There's, again, they have this person in jail. Look at those bad Spanish people. Let's get Angelina Cisneros out of jail.
Spanish colonial rule.
So what Hearst does.
Damsel in distress story. Have we seen that lately? Gabby Petito. By the way, sounds like her fiance killed himself. They found a body yesterday.
Is sent to Cuba a guy named Carl Decker. Decker was in the Washington, D.C. bureau of the New York Journal. And he goes there ostensibly as the journal's man in Havana.
Decker secures a room across from the prison where Cisneros is being held.
Decker's secret instructions are to find a way to break Evangelina Cisneros out of jail and get her to the United States safely.
Decker and his accomplices, who were able to pass instructions to Evangelina, set out in the dead of night.
So they break her out of jail. Again, they make the story. They break her out of jail. She gets out.
Across the moonlit rooftop of the jail, across a very creaky plank connecting it to another building, Evangelina Cisneros has been broken out of jail and then, dressed as a boy, is escorted aboard a passenger steamer, American flagged passenger steamer, headed to New York City.
So they're making the news as well as covering it. So they're really doing
Hi, my
some-
name is Christina, and the topic of today's presentation is why Joseph Pulitzer is important in journalism.
So anyway, we also have sex scandals.
Students with ADHD save 10 hours studying with this Chrome extension.
But no, by all means.
Grover Cleveland has a number of claims to fame and infamy. He is the only president
Remember, Cleveland was Pulitzer's guy.
to be elected to 2 non-consecutive terms. He is both the 22nd and 24th president of the United States. He was the only bachelor president to marry in the White House. And as previously noted in this segment, Grover was his middle name. His first name was Stephen Cleveland. But Cleveland's private affairs very nearly derailed his first election altogether. A reform-minded Democratic governor of New York and a former mayor of Buffalo, Grover Cleveland, known as Grover the Good to his supporters, easily won his party's nomination for president in July of 1884, back in the days when party bosses rather than primary voters picked the candidates. Less than 2 weeks later, though, on July 21st, a potentially devastating story appeared in the Buffalo Evening Telegraph. It reported that a decade earlier, a 38-year-old widow, Maria Halpin, had given birth to a son she named Oscar Folsom Cleveland, and that the boy was given up for adoption after she was sent to an insane asylum. Similar rumours had been raised in Cleveland's earlier political campaigns, and this time his staff didn't even bother to deny that he and Halpin had previously been what they described as illicitly acquainted. But then came the spin. His staff told reporters that Cleveland, and indeed quite a number of other Buffalo businessmen, had enjoyed the affections of Mrs. Halpin, insinuating that she was essentially a sex worker, and that after she became pregnant, Cleveland, as the only bachelor among them, did the honourable thing and claimed to be the boy's father, gave him his name, and once Halpin's alcoholism became apparent, helped him to find a suitable family for adoption. And for a while, it looked as though the scandal might just fade away. Cleveland's rival for the presidency, Senator James Blaine, was already damaged political goods. He'd won the nomination of a deeply divided Republican Party, despite having been caught some years before trading political favours for cash. Blaine hobnobbed with the wealthy elite, while Cleveland identified with the working and middle classes. Still, Blaine's supporters...
Right. Classic cartoon. Ma, ma, where's my pa? Gone to the White House. Ha, ha, ha. That was an actual political song from 1884. So again, Cleveland admitted he dated Ms. Halpin. He may or may not have been the father of the child. He took care of the child. He said he was a good guy. He got elected. But it was in all the papers. It was a major political scandal. So we have all sorts of crazy stuff. We got sex, we got wars, and it's all over the place. So things are a little crazy. and people know how to use the media. We've talked about Roosevelt. Here he is. It's fake. He didn't ride up San Juan Hill. He walked up under the cover of the fire of the African-American troops. But this is the picture you see. By the way, he tailored his own uniforms. He wanted to look like a hero, put it in all the media. Media ate it up. It's a good story. You have, and again, they make other stories. Nellie Bly, who worked for Hearst, went around the world in 72 days. You have more women writing. Anna Leon Owens of Anna and the King, or The King and I, from Rodgers and Hammerstein. She went on to be a reporter. She reported from Russia. So you have women coming in. You have people manipulating the media and using it to be a using the media to be a political platform. So we have all sorts of shenanigans going on. But
hello and welcome to
we have the other side of the coin.
Another U.S. History Online lesson. Today we're going to continue with our unit on the Progressive Era by examining the muckrakers. So what is a muckraker? Well, a muckraker is a journalist, could be someone writing an article, could be someone writing a book, could be someone taking pictures, could be someone drawing cartoons, and all in an effort to bring awareness to the dirt or the muck in society. Their goal is to bring it to the attention of public officials in government in hopes of trying to address some of these problems. And it's also bringing awareness to American people that may not know about some of these problems. The name muckraker was given to these journalists by President Theodore Roosevelt because they were always bringing up the muck in American society. In fact, you've already learned about one of the muckrakers, Thomas Nast, and his efforts to expose political corruption. The first muckraker that we're going to talk about today is Frank Norris. Frank Norris wrote a book called The Octopus in 1901, which is a fictional account about the struggle that farmers were engaged in with railroad monopoly.
Fiction about the railroad.
Police during the age of industrialization. And it helps lead to the breakup of these monopolies, like what takes place in the Supreme Court case Northern Securities versus the US in 1904. Another influential muckraker was Lewis Hine. Lewis Hine was a photojournalist that was able to capture child labor. He was able to show kids working in coal mines and in factories, in every other working condition imaginable. This helped pave the way for child labor laws in different states and across the country as a whole. Ida Tarbell was a writer that was able to expose the ruthless business tactics of the Standard Oil Company in a series of articles in McClure's magazine published together in 1904. These articles were so damaging that they led to the Supreme Court case Standard Oil versus the US in 1911. The same Supreme Court case that would split up the Standard Oil Company of John Rockefeller. In his book, How the Other Half Lives, written in 1890, Danish immigrant Jacob Riis was able to expose the living conditions of the urban poor, focusing primarily on tenements, all in an effort to show the middle class, literally, how the other half lives. He was able to do this in photos and through story. And as a result, New York City passed building codes to promote safety and health. Last, and certainly not least, is the book The Jungle, written by Upton Sinclair in 1906. In the book The Jungle, it investigates the dangerous working conditions and unsanitary procedures in the meatpacking industry of Chicago. This will lead to a couple of different pieces of legislation to reform the food industry. The first, coming in 1906, was the Pure Food and Drug Act, which required all food and medicines to have labels with ingredients, side effects, and other things. This act still exists and is regulated.
Fine, but Upton Sinclair wrote a fictional novel. all of this is based on stuff that may, bad things happen, but it's still fiction. Another thing, again, bias or unbiased, there is another side to a lot of these investigative reports. More, if you have fewer people in a house and an apartment, the rents go up higher. You cure and treat meat well, you throw away the bad meat, and it costs more to treat the edible meat, costs go up. This is, again, a balancing act we have today. How much regulation versus cost? So, these guys didn't care. They just went in and said, this is what we see. So, yes, they had some real legitimate issues, but they went in there and crusaded, and there's other perspectives. And they didn't care about other perspectives. So good stuff happened, but it was all, again, nobody cared about ethics. You just go in and good, bad, otherwise, do whatever. So, that's where we are at the end of the 19th century. Things are a little crazy. And you have these media, which is powerful enough to start a war. So, in the 20th century, people recognize the power of the media. Some people use it. Some people want to limit it. We are still having those discussions today. Anyway, we have the tests next week. I posted a little extra credit thing, quiz based on today's presentation. Any questions? Anything else going on? In that case, have a lovely weekend. Peace out, dude. See you next time.